All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Behavioral Brief webinar hosted by QBS. Today we'll be talking about selecting and successfully teaching independent living skills to adults with developmental disabilities. My name is Erin Mayberry. I'm one of the master trainers at QBS and also a board certified behavior analyst. Let's go ahead and get started. The purpose of our training today is to decide which skills are most appropriate for each consumer and to teach those skills in such a way that will allow each person to participate as fully as possible in his or her own community. So today we'll be talking about selecting which skills to teach. What is the most useful skill for the client? What skills do they use most often? And also important to consider the consumer's preferences. We'll also talk about how to best teach these skills. We'll discuss 4 methods for teaching independent living skills today, as well as adapting the environment and materials. We want to consider materials and settings similar to the natural environment to increase generalization. So what skills should we teach? We might teach things like time management, following or clarifying instructions, or filling out job application forms. We might also teach things like grooming or dressing appropriately for a job, asking for assistance or accepting feedback, navigating the environment, including pedestrian safety, and leisure skills that are appropriate to age level and functioning level, maybe things like cooking, dancing, or surfing the internet. That sounds like a lot, so let's narrow it down. Consumers will be more motivated to learn if it's a preferred skill. We also want skills that are relevant to that person's environment. If it's not practiced often, it may not be maintained over time, and time may be better spent on other targets. If the individual is headed to a less restrictive environment, we might want to train that consumer in skills needed in that environment with materials used in that environment. Also consider others in the consumer's age group. We can teach skills that allow for new opportunities for meaningful social interactions with their peers. We want to avoid pre-vocational activities, things like pegs, pegboards, sorting colored blocks, and identifying tools on flashcards. These tasks may not generalize once the consumer leaves the workshop or training environment. Often, consumers never move on from these targets because they don't generalize to actual job tasks. Instead, we can match materials and skills available in jobs. Targets like sweeping and cleaning tables may be more job-related. In 1977, Stokes and Bayer wrote An Implicit Technology of Generalization. It's important to consider things like programming common stimuli, bringing items into the training that will be present in the natural environment. We also want to train to generalize to other settings with other people. We can use natural maintaining contingencies, so people can earn money for doing tasks or get recognition for a job well done. So things not to teach. Reed et al. Wrote Purposeful Training with Severely Handicapped Persons, a Trainer Guidebook. They talk about things not to teach, and then we can talk about what to teach instead. So maybe things like completing a lacing card or pointing to pictures of household items. If we teach a person to color pictures or point to pictures of items, they may not be able to recognize the actual item in their environment. Also, we're not teaching the consumer how and when to use the skill, so the consumer will be able to apply it to his or her daily life. So what to teach instead? Instead of completing a lacing card, we can teach how to lace his or her own shoe. Instead of coloring fruit, we can teach how to peel an orange. Instead of pointing to household items, we might teach how to put dirty clothes in a washing machine. Instead of matching shapes, we might match same colored socks. And instead of pointing to pictures of utensils, we might teach the individual how to hold and use a fork. We want to use the same materials for teaching as the person is going to learn to use in their natural environment so that we can promote generalization. For instance, we might use the client's own shoe if we're teaching lacing. We might use a microwave or a TV remote found in the person's home. We want to teach leisure skills so the consumer has an extensive repertoire of leisure activities and can choose what to engage in. Don't assume the consumer knows how to work the TV remote or how to use the iPad or surf YouTube. Also consider the consumer's preference. Don't teach what you find reinforcing, teach what the consumer might prefer. We might also need to use preference assessments if appropriate here. Make sure that skills we are teaching are age appropriate. If we're teaching skills that peers are doing, we offer more opportunities for social interaction. Maladaptive behavior might be occurring during leisure time because the person doesn't have enough skills or activities to engage in during leisure time. Boredom may be the antecedent to challenging behavior. By teaching appropriate leisure skills and providing access to meaningful choice of activity, we may actually reduce challenging behavior. If the consumer utilizes alternative modes of communication like text or communication device, it should always travel with that person. The consumer should always have access to means of communication. We can program for generalization by practicing communication in many settings with many different people, not just in the controlled, distraction-free training environment. Remember, when we're teaching someone to speak or sign, use frequent requests that they might request throughout the day and reinforce those requests. So here are some examples of non-functional skills that we might be teaching. Manually signing the name of the president or pointing to a picture of a battleship. How to ask for a drink using a magazine picture or responding to requests like clap your hands. We might be manually signing the color purple. There are likely to be few opportunities to practice communicating these words or demonstrating these requests. So instead, we can teach more functional communication. Skills like teaching a person to sign his or her name, teaching a non-vocal person to point to no on their communication board, teaching someone to ask for a drink during snack time, or to respond to please sit down, or teaching a non-vocal person to manually sign toilet. Something else to consider. Will there be opportunities to use this skill? If there's no chance to practice the skill, it might be better to choose a different skill to target. For example, if I teach someone to make a sandwich, but they only have access to cafeteria-style arrangements in the residence, it might be more functional to teach that person how to get a tray, the appropriate utensils to use, where to stand in line, and how to serve themselves or request certain foods. According to Bannerman et al., studies have shown that if an individual is given a choice in any one situation, it may improve performance. Results applying to choice regard things like activity, materials being used, treatment to be implemented, which may actually increase consumer satisfaction and participation, consequences delivered for good performance, and the pace of instruction. Choice may even decrease problem behavior and increase compliance. To determine how and when to offer choice, consider each consumer. The consumer should be allowed to exercise choice as their abilities allow. Don't forget, we may have to teach choice through decision-making or discrimination between yes, no, and I want or don't want. So let's talk about how to teach skills. One method is behavior skills training. Behavior skills training has often been used in staff training, but can be used in training skills with higher functioning consumers as well. With behavior skills training, first, we explain the task. Then we model the task and ask the person to perform the task. Provide immediate feedback and ensure generalization to the environment where the person might use that skill. Lago Marcino and colleagues used behavioral skills training to teach 5 teenage residents in a residential facility to dance. Training involved description and demonstration of dance movements, broken down by leg movements, then arm movements, and finally, coordination of leg and arm. Generalization was programmed to multiple settings, including an office, the residential living room, and a dance hall. Other methods for teaching more complex skills involve breaking down the task into smaller steps. We might use a task analysis, either in written or picture schedule form. We could use forward chaining, where we teach the first step of the task, and once that's mastered, move on to the first and second steps, etc. We can also use backward chaining, where the last step of the task is first, and systematically move back in the chain until the consumer completes the entire chain independently. Gruber, Reeser, and Reed used the backward chain procedure to teach 4 males ages 18 to 26 to walk independently from their living area to the school. We can also use shaping, where we reinforce each closer approximation to the terminal behavior or goal. QBS will have future behavioral briefs that focus more specifically on these teaching methods, so stay tuned. Don't forget, reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. If you are using verbal praise to reinforce, be specific about what the person did well and use age-appropriate praise. Things like high fives and fist bumps might also be appropriate, or tangibles, maybe iPad, magazine, or favorite snack. A couple of considerations. We might have to do some staff training. So make sure staff are trained in what choices can be provided for each consumer, how to effectively present choice, and how to assist clients in following through with choice making. Bannerman et al. Offer this example. Instead of immediately correcting a client that doesn't want to take a bath because she's watching TV, consider if it's appropriate to offer options on time the client can take the bath. Are staff motivated to provide choices? Bannerman also suggests setting up contingencies for staff. Supervisors might schedule an observation, provide feedback to staff, and praise the support of client choice making. In conclusion, it's important to involve the consumer in which skills to learn. Offer practical skills that will generalize to the natural environment by training in similar environments and using materials from that environment. Carefully select the most appropriate teaching method for the consumer in question and provide reinforcement throughout the process. Here's our list of references from this behavioral brief. In the Handouts tab, you also have links to some of these references, as well as a link to the handout for the PowerPoint presentation. If you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box now. And for more information, you can go to our website or follow us on social media. Thank you very much for joining us today. We hope to see you back in another behavioral brief in the future.